Hey, Derek, how are you today?
Hey, Mike. I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for joining me. And just before I let Derek sort of lead the way here, Derek has a great Instagram account called The Athletic Department HQ, and I followed his stuff. He invited me to contribute recently, and so I thought it'd be really cool to have him on the podcast to learn more about what he's doing. So, for those who are listening, Derek, can you talk a little bit about sort of the athletic department and sort of how you got started there?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier. It's only been a couple months old, and it's really kind of taken off. But the idea behind it was really just I work. I've been an athletic director for 20 plus years, working as sports information, AD, all different types of roles, coaching, and as someone who's on social media a lot for my career, I just felt like there was not a real great um, page for coaches and ADs to get resources. Of course, there's the big organizations, the national organizations, but they don't do a lot of practical stuff. And so that was kind of where it came from. Just thought, hey, I think I can do this, and I think I can do it at a visually a pretty cool level that will be people will like, they'll get engaged with, and yeah, it's just kind of taken off. And it's really just a place to give resources to people, put a spotlight on people. I love putting a spotlight on other people and showing what they're doing because there's a lot of valuable resources out there that I think if people knew about, it would really make a difference for them.
I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said to you before we hit record, when you told me that the account is 2 months old, I was sort of floored by that because if you visit the account, it's super polished, super sophisticated. The information's really, really good, just super impressive. So I guess along the lines of, getting the reason why you got into it, right, to sort of give a better resource to the people who might be interested. Have you gotten any specific feedback from the ADs and administrators out there about what you're putting out?
Yeah, I think I've had several ADs tell me that they're using this stuff already in their orientation, their in service, because it is really practical. Especially like we do like these coaching lists where it's 5 things you can do with your team today or whatever, and those things are just things you can put into practice immediately. So I think that's been helpful. I think like the video you were on and some other compilation videos I've done, getting some experts to talk about areas that I think are a little underserved, like mental performance. I think people are catching on to it, but I think it's still it's so underserved right now. And so, yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback. And of course, you look at the analytics, you see people saving things, and you're like, okay, there's obviously some value because there's a lot of saves and a lot of shares, and so probably more than what I'm even hearing, really.
Yeah, and I'm learning more about that, and I don't want to sort of bog the conversation down in that, but I could go in that direction. But I will say this: I think I'm really fascinated by the athletic director role, and from my perspective, right. So recently, I was asked to speak to a bunch of coaches, a group of coaches at a private high school here in New Jersey, where I am, about a topic, and I'm fascinated as an athletic director how challenging that it must be to get people on board, right? Because the AD came to me and said, "Hey, I think this is a topic that all of my coaches need to know about." And he was proactive in bringing in someone to talk about, like in this case, it was about like communication between the coaches and the athletes and how important that could be to performance. But, as I'm the guy standing in front of that group of coaches, some people are leaning in, trying to get information, and some are just sort of like, rolling their eyes or just checked out. So, like, from your own experience as an AD, like, how challenging is that, right? When you put out all this great information, some people probably love it, and some people probably go, I don't need this, or leave me alone, right? So, what's your experience with that in terms of getting people to buy in?
Well, I think you're going to always have those old school guys that think that they've already kind of, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. They've been doing this for however long, and those are going to be challenging people, I think, to deal with a little bit. Like at our school, people like that don't last very long because we're setting a bar of excellence, and so like excellence means continued evolution, continued improvement. And so if you're not willing to continue to grow, I don't know how you can teach anybody or coach anybody if you're not willing to learn something yourself. So that's kind of a
Mm.
standard for us, is that we're going to keep improving, we're going to keep raising the bar. um, in terms of buy-in, I think it just depends. Like when you give people cool drills and things like that, they love that. They're all about it. Like this, but when you start talking about mental performance, or you start talking about things that are like a little outside of their comfort zone, it's a little harder to get that buy-in, and And I think a lot of it comes down to modeling it and just saying like, this is what we're going to be about, and we're going to keep pushing it forward. And you're either going to get on board or you're not. Um, but that's yeah, I think it depends on the topic a little bit in terms of buy-in.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll just speak from my own perspective. I think mental performance definitely falls into that bucket of there's a generational gap. The younger coaches tend to really embrace it because they're like they can relate to it. Maybe they're not that far removed from their athletic past, right? But they just have a more awareness about the importance of that element of performance. Whereas you might see some older coaches be like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need this, right? And I think you're right. There's always going to be some element of that. But I think it's cool that you're in an environment where the leadership at your school, and obviously I don't know much about it, but it sounds like they really do, they value sort of kind of coming up to speed in terms of the where the world is and sort of making those resources available to the students and to the staff members.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's part of. We want to win. We want to be excellent. We want the best for the kids. But like, if there's something that can give us an edge, we want to be on the forefront of that. We don't want to be 5 years behind where a lot of schools are. We want to be right at the beginning of it and saying like, well, let's get this edge here where we can. And in terms of the mental performance space, especially with what you're doing, like I'm very thankful that I think the conversation with mental health in general has changed over the last 10 years or so. There's much more transparency around mental health. Like things you couldn't have talked about 20 years ago, I feel like are much more acceptable. And now that that door's open, it's a little easier to talk about this with athletes as well. Um, the tough guy persona is a little bit, we don't have to deal with that quite as much anymore. Like athletes want to be the best, they want to win, and they're a little more open to that kind of thing. So, but yeah, our school has done a great job of just saying like whatever we think is going to be good for our kids, we're going to try to do.
Yeah, and having spent a little bit of time at a private school when I was doing my training, I worked at an all boys Catholic high school here in New Jersey, and I was a volunteer mental performance coach. I kind of faced some of these things from my own perspective, but I also got to see some of the realities of what it's like to operate a private school. Now, I was sort of way removed from that, but enrollment, right? Getting the athletes that you need to win to keep the doors open, right? Like at some level, even though it's a school, it's an educational institution, there's a marketing element to it. So like, can you talk about that? And maybe some of it's sort of tied into what we see in college sports, but it sounds like that's sort of where you guys are going, which is, hey, we got to be out there on the front to be able to attract people into our school, whether it's athletes or frankly, just regular student enrollment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely their marketing is a huge part of it from the school perspective, but also from the athletic perspective.
Hmm.
Athletics is one of the glimpses people get into your school more than any other thing. It's in the
Yeah.
newspaper, it's on the news. It's just a platform where you can talk about your school. And so we're down here in Palm Beach County, which is very competitive in terms of affluence and the level of athletes that are here and just what we're competing with. So yeah, there's definitely an element of um, we need to tell people what we're doing right. People need to see what King's Academy is doing well. Um, we're big believers in build our program from the ground up. So we like to look at this like a 7-year journey. We hope our kids come in sixth grade and then they're here through the rest of high school. We're not big on going out trying to recruit. We're not trying to. We want to create a product that is so good that people want their kids there from the beginning to the end. And but you got to market that, and it's just that's athletics in general now. It's such a competitive space in terms of with NIL and just all the different things that are happening. We
Hmm.
have kids with NIL deals now, and it's a crazy landscape shift, but it is part of the reality now.
Yeah, but I think, when I think about what you just said there about 6 through 12 and keep bringing them in at sixth grade and keeping them for 7 years, that's not for everybody, right? And that's marketing, right? Like finding the audience that you want to attract, like that's a very sophisticated way of thinking about it from an educational institution standpoint of, hey, this is who we serve, this is our value proposition, and we need to articulate that in a very 21st century way to try to get to those people that we want to bring into the doors. And I think I think it's really cool. And it's like one of those things where if you don't keep up, if you don't evolve, you're gonna burn out, right? So it sounds
Yep.
like you're learning how to do that. I guess a question I have, and I don't know, how you would answer it, but I'm definitely curious about it is because I think that kind of in my mind speaks to the balance between winning on the field and doing things the quote unquote right way, whatever that is, whatever your right way is, right? So balancing that, like, hey, we want to win and be as competitive as possible, but we want to do it within the framework of our culture. Can you talk about how, at Kings, just say where you're at, like how you do that as a school?
Yeah, well, I think we are always trying to stay on mission, which I think really any good organization's got to figure out what they're about and then say this is what we're about and this is where the direction we're going to go. I think the school's helpful to us in terms of staying on mission in the sense of like admissions are strict. They're very detailed in who comes in and who doesn't come in. And so, we're making sure that the kids that are coming are kids who are, first of all, great kids that are, here to like be a part of what we're doing. Um, Kids who are going to get the grades, kids who are going to, behavior wise are going to fit our profile. And so that helps a lot. We're starting off with a good group of kids to begin with. But yeah, you're always balancing it. Like, you're going to have new students that come in every year, and those kids who have been there for 4 or 5 years, guess what? Like, there's a new talented athlete that's here that's competing with you. And that's just part of it. That's part of competitive athletics. And as much as we'd love to see the sixth grader go all the way to the senior year and evolve into like a star player, it doesn't always happen that way. But we do feel like when you build a family atmosphere where people feel like this is part of like their family, um, there's a certain value in that you don't get everywhere, and we definitely want to protect that.
Yeah. But I think that's really important because I think you highlight a couple of really important points, things that I would probably come out of my own mouth, which is, we value competition. We want to be good. We want to win. But it sounds like there's all these other um, attributes about the community that even if a kid who starts in sixth grade and ends up as a senior who's not um, as doesn't have as big of a role on the field or the court as they would have liked, it's still worth it to be at a place like Kings because of the academics and the culture and those things. And I talk to kids about that stuff all the time as it relates to college, right? I'm not a recruiting advisor, but I am someone who helps them think about decisions and say, hey, do you want to go to a place where the only thing that matters is, winning and everything else is secondary? Or do you want to be in a place where you're happy to live and you have the major that you want and you have coaches that care about you? It doesn't really matter to me, but you need to understand what's most important so that you can make decisions through that lens, right? And I think as it relates to any family, you're going, is this the right place for my kids? I have my own children, right? Is this the right place for my kids? If the only thing that's dictating that is their playing time, I'm probably going to move them somewhere else, but maybe that it works in the short term, but it's probably not the best decision for most families because we all retire at some point, even if it's at 22, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, sports, it's things can change so fast, and if that's your whole reason for being somewhere, I mean, it takes one injury, it takes
Mhm.
one coaching change, it takes one kid moving in to derail whatever you thought you were going to be. And so yeah, so we try to make it about so much more than just athletics. We care about their
Yeah.
spiritual life, their academic life. My daughter's a senior at Kings, and it's been the best 4 years for her ever. Um, she plays one sport, and that's her favorite thing about the school is not sports. So she's had a great experience.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah. And frankly, we're in the same boat. I have a son who just graduated high school and he played varsity soccer for 3 years. And his experience was good enough, but that wasn't the reason why he loved school. It was his friends, it was the environment, the community. And I think that is really important again, because that's just reflective of life, right? If sports are the only thing that we're looking at to judge our experience, whether it's our performance on the field or just our happiness, put all eggs in one basket. It's not going to really, doesn't always work out very well because we're not diversified in that, those elements of our identity. One of the things that I mentioned too before we hit record, and I know you're in an SID maybe role now more than an AD role, but you have some coaching experience. And one of the things that I have seen in my work quite a bit more than I ever imagined I would is how the coach athlete relationship impacts the athlete specifically, but it impacts the coach as well. But can you talk about that from an administrator's perspective? Like, what's your involvement in that and sort of how you manage those types of issues? At least maybe from a personal perspective, because I'm sure it varies, place to place.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we talk to our coaches all the time about relationship building, how important it is. I mean, especially at the athlete and coach level, but even with the athlete and parent level, building those relationships, putting the time into it ahead of time, like you can avoid so many pitfalls later when the relationship's already there. When there's no relationship, and then you have to have a hard conversation or you have to make a hard decision,
Mhm.
um, there's not a soft landing to that most of the time. So we're talking about that all the time about um, getting to know the kids, spending time with the kids outside of just your practice, going to their games in seasons you're not coaching, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Because kids know the people who care about them. Kids are very perceptive, and they know like if you actually
Yes.
value them as a person or if they're just an asset to your athletic program. And so we constantly are preaching that the relationship is so important. And the coaches who don't do it are the ones who have the biggest headaches with parents and with players.
Yeah, that's a great answer because I think, you know, I think I spoke about this in the video that I shared for your Instagram about the importance of clear communication, right? That clarity a lot of times will alleviate problems. And even before the relationship maybe evolves to a caring and trusting one, but at least if I know what the ground rules are going into it, it's much easier for me as a family, as an athlete to operate because I know exactly what to expect. Versus when there's ambiguity, now all of a sudden I'm trying to guess at what to expect. And now I'm trying to figure it out on the fly. But I think the other thing that you said there, which is, I guess, I mean, I guess it is related, but that kids are so perceptive about who cares about them. And I see this because I'm usually the objective third party who kind of gets the venting and talk about that kind of stuff. They know when someone gives a, you know what about them, and that makes all the difference because, and when I talk to coaches about this, like work that I do, it's if you're building that relationship and you are communicating clearly and there is trust, you're going to get the best version of that kid. And if your primary goal as a coach is to win, that's the thing that's going to allow you to do it. And I think that's the hard part sometimes for coaches because they're so used to coaching the X's and O's and the game and the strategy that they don't realize that the kids might know exactly what you're saying and they know how to execute it, but their emotional state, their mental state is not allowing them to do it because they're losing motivation, they're losing focus, they're losing confidence because they don't understand where they're supposed to be at. And now the bridge to that is really like, hey, putting your arm around them, having a conversation with them, or being even clear and direct with them to sort of get them back on the track to say, hey, I got your back, or hey, this is what you need to do. But now you're getting the best version of that kid because they're not stuck in their own head trying to figure out where they fit in. And I think that's a big, it's a big roadblock for a lot of the kids that I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's completely true. And um, it, it kind of sparks something in my mind as well, just about the value of assistant coaches and just trying to find people on your
Mm,
staff too that can also help fill those gaps. Because the reality is, like, as much as like my goal is always to connect with kids, you don't connect with every kid. Like, sometimes the personality doesn't mesh. But I've had great assistants who were able to come alongside and be the good cop or the bad cop or whatever we needed. And I think that that's something I guess I've learned as a parent too, is just every kid is different. Not what's fair for one isn't what's fair for others, and what a kid needs is always going to be different. And so, just trying to have good adults who care around, that know how to speak into the lives of the kids. Um, I think if you start from the perspective of like, my goal is not just to win, it's to impact lives, and the winning is going to be a byproduct of that because I'm going to be able to change their life and we're going to have something really great that comes out of this. I think it helps you to see what your real mission is.
yes. Well, I think that point you just made hit home for me on a lot of different levels. Number one, as a parent, right? My children have been high schoolers. My daughter plays multiple sports. My son played soccer. And there's one coach in particular, or coaching staff in particular, that I've had the opportunity to come across who really articulates to me as a dad that I care about your kid over anything. And that's all I really care about. Like I tell these guys, I'm like, thank you for really caring and like taking care of my daughter. It's not like you won the conference. It's not like you won a playoff game. I don't care about that. Yeah, that's great. But you really genuinely care about my daughter versus the coaches who they're well meaning and then this is my second point. I'll get to it, but they're so focused on winning and X's and O's and strategy and kind of what I like sometimes to call derisively playing coach, right? Like I'm like trying to be Ted Lasso and, or I'm trying to be a coach versus like, hey, these are people behind the scenes. But I think that that's important as well. But what I tell kids a lot is, this is my second point, you got to understand, if I'm a head coach in a competitive environment, even at the high school level, I might get paid to win. I have a lot of responsibility in a place like Kings. It might be fundraising. It might be alumni relations. It might be recruitment if that's what you do. But as a head coach, I've got all these responsibilities and I don't really have a lot of free time to build those relationships the way that you'd want to. So to your point, you either have really good assistants who are able to take advantage of that. Or in my case, I say to kids, if you want a relationship with your coach, you might have to be the one that facilitates as much as that's uncomfortable for you. And I think that that's really important too, at least having the empathy from the athlete side to say, hey, the coach isn't ignoring you because he doesn't like you. It's not personal. There's other things that you need to think about that you don't have enough experience in life yet to know, but you need to start to gain that experience because that relationship, yeah, maybe you think it's one-sided because the coach isn't invested in you, but there might be a reason why that is. And if you want the coach to be invested, maybe you need to invest in the relationship, which is a really hard conversation to have with young people. Not all of them get it. Not all of them are willing to do it, but I do feel like it's my responsibility to at least introduce that idea. So like, is that something that like gets kind of talked about in your world?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a varsity basketball coach for 14 years, and one of the things, because you occasionally every coach hears this about playing favorites. So you've got favorites or whatever, and I would openly say like I do have favorites. The ones who show up and work hard and have a great attitude are my favorites, and so there is a level of investment even just in the like I'm going to come work my butt off. I'm going to make it obvious to coach I care about this. I'm gonna not be ignored because I'm going to show like how meaningful this is to me. And then, like I said, the assistants are just huge in that area. When a coach is overwhelmed, like if you put the right people around you, you're gonna have support to be able to know, like, hey, this kid needs this from this guy right now.
Mm-hmm.
But again, to me, at the end of the day, it's gonna keep coming back to like my goal is to impact the kids. And if I can't put down the X's and O's, or I can't put down the fundraising, or I can't put down whatever it is, when a kid really needs something, then that's kind of on me, And I've had to change my mentality on that somewhat. I remember years ago being frustrated when kids would come to my office and want to talk and hang out because I'm busy. I got all this stuff to do, and then somebody at some point said something to me about just giving kids that minute of time is like could be a life changing conversation for them. And that just stuck with me. Like, all right, when people come to me, they obviously need me for something, and it's going to probably be more valuable than whatever I'm working on right now. And of course there's a limit to that, but I found that to be pretty helpful. And the relationship building has taken off from there. And then kids will do anything for you at that point. When they know you love them, the kids will, they talk about run through a brick wall. They'll do whatever
Mm-hmm.
for a coach that they really love if they just feel like you care about them.
Yes. I believe that to be 100% the truth. Yeah, we all learn those lessons as we go, right? Through our career, whatever the career is. But like, we're very similar, right? I got into sports psychology in my early 40s. I didn't do this from the start of my career. I had 20 years in another field that I was unfulfilled and I wanted to get into it. And the reason why I wanted to get into this field particularly is to have impact, right? To be of service to young people, to be able to sort of serve them in a way that I wasn't able to be served when I was their age, right? We hear that a lot, but there are times when I'm stressed out that things aren't going the way I want them to go, but I have to remember why I got into it. It's like, hey, this is about them. It's not about me. If I do right by them, over the long run, right? If I'm talking to an athlete about process and their performance, hey, stick with the process, focus on what you can control, and eventually you'll see the results. Then I've got to back that up. I've got to walk the talk, which is,
Yeah.
hey, I got to invest in you. I got to be present when I talk to you. I got to, whatever it is that I, suggest to you or try to help you do, it's got to be from a place of love and care, that this is going to help you get to where you want to go, even if it doesn't produce the result I want, as quickly. And I find that, from in my role, I think kids really do appreciate that about having the opportunity to work with somebody like me, is that I don't have a skin in, I'm not invested in their outcomes. Right. And I think they want that, right? Like, yes, nobody's going to be harder on most kids than they are on themselves. They don't need you to, not you, anybody, to beat them up over it or be hard on them. What they need is, hey, I know you're doing your best. I know you're working your butt off. I saw that you made the mistake. Don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Whatever those things are. Kids know that. And like, having those kinds of people around them, it's just so valuable. And as a parent, I think it's really, really critical. So it sounds like you're in a great place in terms of specifically being at King's Academy, where, you have that support. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. There's alignment, and you've got the support you need to build an athletic program that looks like what you'd want it to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we have a great team that's, but again, it comes back to everyone's mission driven. And so we're all rowing the same direction.
Mhm.
And that's just super helpful. Like, because we sometimes we overinflate our own importance, but like, I'm one person of many at King's Academy that's pouring into each one of these kids every single day. Teachers,
Mhm.
administrators, pastors, all these different people. And it's like, we talk to the kids all the time about, you don't realize like what value you're having here with people, having so many people who are invested in you. But yeah, we're all in that same mission driven mindset. And I think any organization, any team does that, like, there's going to be success that follows.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think you can disagree, right? Reasonable people can disagree, right? So the way that the way that we deliver that mission can be up for debate internally within the four walls of the school. But if you always come back to the mission of like, this is what we're trying to do, we're going to get back on track together a lot faster than I'm trying to fulfill my own personal agenda. And that's an ego driven thing versus
Yeah.
we're doing something for the greater good. Um, this question's a little off topic, but I was thinking about it as you were giving an answer. What was it like to have your daughter under the same roof as you, as a member of the administration, being in the same school as her every day?
It's awesome. I love it. I love taking her to school every day, that car ride to school, just having those conversations there and back. Um, until last year, she didn't play any sports. So that was I was very excited when she joined weightlifting, and that was strictly exactly what we're talking about. A coach that's just a great coach. Started building a relationship with her, just talking to her at games. I was there all the time and got her to do weightlifting. She loved it. She was really good at it. And so that just gave us another little thing in common. But I love it. I love having her there every day. She's a great kid, and so she's never in trouble or anything like that. Um, so yeah, so it's a blessing to have her there. It's nothing but good.
Yeah. Is she going to be a senior now coming up?
Yeah, yeah. She's gonna be a senior. She'll start school Thursday, and she's raring to go.
Yeah. Let me tell you, as a father who just witnessed his son graduate from high school, it was one of the most joyous occasions of my life. I didn't know how I was going to feel, right? There's a lot of things that you could feel, and yeah, maybe some sadness, but really joyous to see your oldest child, my oldest child, walk across the stage, be so excited about the future, about going off on his own and being independent, and like to watch that and watch kids, whether they're your own child or the other children in that building, which you probably feel like are your own children too, for them to be able to achieve that milestone and then go off into the world and feel like they're really ready to take on something new is like, it's just it's so fulfilling and so rewarding. So I think that's really, really cool. I was just curious as to
Yeah,
what your experience was. I think I would have loved that if I had that
yeah,
opportunity. So I guess my as we sort of move towards sort of finishing things up, I guess what's your vision for the future of the athletic department? Like, where do you see it? I know it's pretty new, but where do you see it going?
I mean, it's a great question because, it's sort of accelerated pretty fast. And so when I first started doing it, I just thought like this will be something that grows over a few years and eventually we'll get an audience, and now that it's got a more significant audience, it's kind of shifting my thinking like, is this a business? Is this something that I just keep doing for fun? It's kind of happened really fast. What I would love to do eventually, I would love to do consulting. I mean, I've got a lot of years of doing a lot of different things, and so
Mhm.
something like this is just a kind of um, it's proving the concept to people, like, hey, this is a person who has a lot to offer, and so there's a little credibility that comes along with like, wow, this guy's got a pretty good following, and whatever. Um, but at the end of the day, like, I'm here on earth to help people. That's really ultimately what I want to do. And I love working with coaches. I've gotten a lot of messages from just different people asking questions, and it's fun to answer that. It's just fun to have a community with different people and get to know guys like you, people that I wouldn't have known otherwise, other than this channel, um, and see them, like be able to put, like I said earlier, put a spotlight on them, and just whatever I can do to lift other people up is great. So I don't know where it's headed, but I know it's very enjoyable and it kind of fits very well alongside my day job. So
That
yeah, so we're
matters.
gonna yeah, it goes hand in hand. So it's not there's no competing there. It's just the same stuff I would use at school is the same stuff I use there, and works pretty well. So
Yeah, and I think that that's again. I mean, it's sort of reiterating kind of what we had just been talking about in terms of being, mission driven. But I think from my own personal perspective, as somebody who sort of went quote unquote all in on what I was doing, like I sort of started over and like I think there is definitely a lot to be said for the process of keeping your primary job, keeping your paycheck, keeping your benefits. I mean, this is me talking, as somebody who's been through it, and then allowing that quote unquote side hustle, whether that has a positive or negative connotation, I don't know, but just letting that evolve. And that sometimes will just dictate to you. The opportunities will present themselves, and then you'll decide like what's the most important thing. But if the value is there and clearly that it is, like I think it's so impressive as somebody who struggled to grow a following and learning more about the way social media works and the algorithms and messaging and all these things that we try to do to get people's attention. And I'm certainly fighting the urge to just do things to get people's attention that are not on mission or not on brand. That's a whole nother conversation. And
yeah,
maybe actually that's something you could talk about. I think you're probably
yeah.
more qualified than I am in a lot of ways. Like, do you ever come up against that, fight that urge of like, is this something I really want to put out or am I just doing it to get eyeballs? Because I do fight that urge.
Yeah, I think that's, I think it's a little bit of, I don't want to say envy sometimes, but you watch other people put some stuff out and you're like, man, that blew up, and that, like, I could do that easily. But you just got, I just try to remind myself, like, um, you want the right customers, you want high value customers.
Yep.
Like I've gotten a lot of followers that are not really necessarily customers. Like they liked a video that was funny, they whatever reason they're there. But when I see like an athletic director follow, I'm like, that's an immediate follow back for me because those are the guys that, like, those are my real people that I really want to connect with. And so
Hmm.
I think just trying to stay aligned on like, this is what I provide. I provide resources for ADs and coaches. I'll occasionally do something funny, but it's going to still be on brand. And I'm going to gear all my stuff to that because I, what good does it have to have tons of followers if they're not potential customers or high
Right.
value followers? And so I think just trying to stay driven on that, going like that. Some of it's getting lucky. Eventually, like you get one video that hits really big, and it's like, okay, well that brought in a lot of people, but like still staying on this is what I'm here for, and your
Yep.
niche, and there's success to be had in that, but it is challenging because you do see other people blowing up, and you're like, man, this
Right.
isn't even good, and they're like getting big. But
Yes. I absolutely fight that urge myself, but I think you're absolutely right there about because like I have to remind myself that the people with exponentially more followers, you don't know who's following them. Because I've gotten follows in some of my social media from people that have, they have 100 followers themselves, or they don't have a picture, or but they reacted to a particular post, and I'm like, okay, it's great. I have another follower next to my name, but that's, like you said, it's not a high value. So I think it's just really important to point out, because like I think about this, and I've wrote about this too in some of my blogs and things like that, about like I have to fight the urge to like judge myself based on results, and not, did I serve the mission today? Because if I served the mission today and I didn't get an extra follower and I didn't get another client, it was still successful. But if I allow myself to judge it just based on that, now I'm going to have the same sort of performance anxiety that my clients have, which is I'm not playing well enough for somebody else to like me. And now what's wrong with me? Versus, no, I did everything I could do today to get better. And it's just a day where I had to put in the work, and it'll pay off at some point in the future. So I got two more
Yeah.
questions for you. One is sort of a lighthearted one, because I'm really, really curious about this. And then we'll wrap up with my last question, which I usually ask for everybody. The Netflix video that's on your Instagram. Tell me
Yeah.
about that. Like, is that like, I mean, I assume that's a parody that you sort of created. Am I getting that
Yeah.
right?
So there's like a trend, this Netflix trend. People are doing this whole thing, their documentary thing or whatever. And so um I was just sitting around the house one day, and I told my wife, like, hey, let's do this. Like, this would be kind of funny to do. I had my camera stuff with me. So we just made it. And I was just like, now I will say, like, the premise behind it is generally true. I've gotten so many emails like that over the years from parents complaining about playing time. And that's a whole other
Yes.
conversation. But like, that's true. But like, my reaction to it, of course, is like played up. It is parody. Although it's funny how many people commented like, either like, hey, where can I find this on Netflix? And I'm like, okay, it's not
Yeah.
real. And people who were critical, like, I can't believe this guy's so emotional. I'm like, I'm just joking. It's just a joke. But like, it is based on reality in terms of
Yeah.
like, it is frustrating to deal with this. But yeah, that video kind of blew up quite a bit, and people really liked it because I think it's relatable. I think people on one side or the other, they've either been the parent who's wanting to contact the coach, or the people who see the parent doing that and are like, it's just, every coach has been through this, every AD has been through this. So I think that's kind of why it blew up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything you said there really hit home for me, because it was like, I know this is not real, but it could be real, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when I watched your facial reactions like that, like you were sort of across from that person who was, confronting you about it, like the emotions you were giving off are emotions that I could feel. Like if I was in Derek's shoes, like I would be like, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath here. I'm going to be
Yeah.
really, trying to stay calm and measured so that I don't, right? Like, and that guy, I took that. I think that was like really cool, because I think it does allow people to see what it looks like on the other side of that desk, right? Usually it's, for me, it's I'm dealing with the parent or the athlete who's having the conversation on the side of the camera you can't see. But what we see on that other side is a human being who's like, how do I handle this? Or, oh, here we go again, or whatever those things are. And like, I think that's what I was talking about before with that empathy, right? Being able to put
Yeah.
yourself in your AD shoes or your coach's shoes and say, like, this isn't easy for them either. The decisions they're making are hard ones, but you can't make everybody happy. So you've got to be able to understand that this is a really challenging position they're in. At least try to give them some grace and understand where they're coming from, versus pointing the finger and coming out firing, because that's no fun. There's no fun for anybody.
Yeah. It's very difficult because, we all love our kids. We all think our kids are amazing, and they are, but it's very difficult for a parent to hear something they don't want to hear about their own kid. And it's a losing battle having that conversation a lot of times, especially when the parent is already upset. And so sometimes,
Mhm.
and that's one of those things I have had to learn over the years. Like, not everything needs a response. Sometimes people just need you to listen to them, empathize, let them get out whatever they want to say, and then you move on. And try not to take it personally, because it's really about their kid and their own,
Yep.
whatever's going on with them is what the issue is. It's really not about the coach. And sometimes it's the coach, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not.
Well, I'll make one last point on that before I ask you the last question. But what I usually say to people, and I take this advice for myself as a parent: if your kid is not in danger, then it's going to be okay. Right.
Yeah.
If it's right, if there's an issue of like, if there's a safety issue, the coach is doing something abusive, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, the kid's in danger, full stop. Right. But if it's my feelings are hurt because I'm not playing, yeah, that might be worthy of a conversation, but you've got to temper that conversation and approach it in a realistic way, which is, hey, this is just a sport. This is just a game. These are real people. And if you don't like the decision that's made, if you don't learn to accept it, life's going to be really hard. You think it's bad now at 17, 18 years old. Wait till you get to, be a professional and they cut your pay or they lay you off because, you're not going to be able to do anything about that. So anyway, I don't want to belabor that point, but the last question I usually ask is, if there's one piece of advice that you'd leave with a listener, what would it be? And in your case, I would allow you to pick the audience that you want to sort of deliver that takeaway to.
Boy, there's so many things I've learned over the years, like so many mistakes I've made over time. Like that's really, you learn the most from the mistakes. And so I'm just trying to think of all these mistakes. Um, I would keep going back to what I've said a lot throughout this whole interview is be mission driven, like figure out what you're about. And then that is what guides what you do, not winning or losing. Like if winning is your mission, you're going to be disappointed a lot because even the best of the best don't always win, but you can always stay on mission and you figure out what it's about. And to me, I'm going to urge you, if you're a coach or an AD, it better be about kids, like seeing the best outcome for kids, seeing them become great people, once they're out of your gym or off your field. And that's where your legacy is, starting with our own children, but then obviously those kids that we impact through sports, like you are making a tremendous difference. And so you need to stay driven by that. And you're always going to win if that's what you do. Whether it's a scoreboard or not, like the win is actually what the product of this kid becoming something better than what they were when you got them. And so I think, I mean, even parents can listen to that. Like, what's your mission with your kid? Like, who cares if they
Of
always
course.
succeed? What are you trying to get them? You're trying to get them to be the best person they can be as they become an adult. So adversity is part of that. You need them to have some adversity. So yeah, I think just know what you're about and stick to that. And I think it's going to be a success regardless of whatever the outcome is.
Yep. I couldn't agree with that more. It's a great way to end. Derek, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. It was
Yeah,
really
Mike,
great to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to more conversations in the future.
for sure. Thanks again, Mike. We'll see you later.
Thank you.